Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about this sword right here. It is a custom messer from Landsknect Emporium, and before I get into the review, a couple quick disclaimers. One, this is a gift from sword friend Ian, whose generosity continues with this messer right here. I love the sword. It's a gift. I'm humbled by it. It kicks me in the feels. So you should know that. It's tough for me to be biased when somebody had a custom sword made for me. I'm kind of predisposed to liking it. This one happens to be a combination of two swords that I really liked and some awesome features from both of them made just for me. So it's tough to be biased. Two, I don't study any martial systems, if that isn't apparent from the other videos I made about messers, but I don't study any martial systems about how to use this sword effectively. And also know that as I'm using this, I'm a little bit diminished myself. I've had some elbow trouble lately. It hasn't quite abated yet, and so most of my experience swinging this around has been, well, I've been in a diminished condition myself. So with those caveats in mind, keep all that in mind as you hear my babbles. So first, this is again, a Landsknect Emporium messer. It's a combination of the Gunther blade, which is basically this is the standard Gunther blade. It's a 27-inch-ish blade. It's got a nice fullered section. It's got a sharpened edge about, the top 25 or third of the blade. It's got this nice clip point on it. But anyway, this is a similar blade that you would see on the Gunther messer. And the Gustav, it's closer to a Gustav handle, but with some additional zazz, if you will. One, this has the Antler handle upgrade. I'll talk about that, but quick spoiler, I really like it. And the CC2 Pommel, which they offer on a few of their swords. This has also some additional file work from Adam at Landsknect Emporium, and that file work would normally be a little bit extra as well. So he threw that into the project and made it extra zazzy. And I'm looking at this. It has some of the ruggedness that I would commonly see on Landsknect Emporium. It's still there. It's still very much apparently a Landsknect Emporium piece, but I believe Adam took a lot of extra little care and addressed a lot of the little complaints that I've had and some other stuff, and I see some of that extra effort here. So I'll walk you through that and talk about it. But anyway, the sword is around 1,050 euros, not shipped. I think it actually came out in total to like 1150 euro, depending on what the currency exchange is. When Sword for Ian commissioned this, the euro was more than the dollar, and now it's a little bit less. But anyway, that puts it in kind of a high-priced ballpark. So if I compare it to the Albion Soldat, which is a $1,200 messer, I guess I could compare it as well to the Darksword Armory messer. Even though they're very, very different swords, they're not at all the same. But if you're looking for a messer, those are two other options. The Darksword Armory is like 650. Both options, with the Landsknect Emporium at the price I noted and the Darksword Armory at the price I noted, come with a scabbard. The Albion does not. That would be an additional chunk. I will link, incidentally, to the review of the Albion Soldat, and when I get around to making one for the Darksword Armory messer, I'll link that in the description as well. Anyway, it's among the higher priced category stuff, so you're getting into the territory of an Albion piece, and so that I suppose is worth noting, because I think the scabbard is only 120 euro. So if I pull that off the top, you're still like getting towards the ballpark of higher end or more expensive blades anyway. So I'll talk about if I think that's worth it or not, or what qualities this has over the other. But anyway, just know, I suppose that's the price, and that's kind of the general competition that I've seen in the area. I'm going to start now with the pommel, the end cap, the bit here. This is the CC2 Pommel from Landsknect Emporium, and if you go on their website, it's a feature that's offered. I believe it's an extra 40 or 80 euro. I can't remember exactly how much, but it's an additional fee to have this. And Adam has clearly put some additional kind of fluting along the edge here, which is nice. It's really pretty to look at. Now, if you hold it down here, which I assume is not the correct way to hold it, it definitely bites in your hands. It's not sharp to hold if you were trying to get extra reach and hold it at the bottom. It'll wiggle in your hand, at least if you're not wearing a glove. There's no extremely sharp ledges or anything on it, but it's got enough little points on it where it's clearly telling me that that's not how you hold it. Holding it in a single-handed grip is fine. If I put two fingers over the edge and try and get two hands on it, which clearly this grip is not really geared towards doing. Maybe it works that way if you have smaller hands, but I certainly can't get two hands on here. I can get an extra couple fingers on. It doesn't bite me the same way at that point, but it certainly feels most at home just holding it in a single-handed grip. I do have a little bit of room to choke up towards the guard or go down this little ledge, this little finger well, the beak down here, swells up and keeps my hand from sliding off. So there's certainly that, but I guess I would say if you find your hand commonly down here, the CC2 pommel is maybe not the best choice. It's beautiful looking, but limits some of the grip options. In contrast, the previous Gunther just had, I believe it was the boxwood grip. It didn't have any special handle on it. I could get two hands on the Gunther grip previously, and I could hold down at the end of the pommel. It gave me a little bit more versatile grip options, but this is so damn pretty. So I'm really happy with it. But I suppose know that. And the fluting work that Adam did on it, I think it adds an extra dimension of character that I really happen to like. Anyway, the way it swells and butts up with the antler, again, there's small little complaints that I could give that are, at this point, I'm going to just call them the Landsknect aesthetic here. I can make out little bits of resin. The scales don't line up perfectly. There's not, perfect isn't the goal, but I can see the work here. They've taken a little bit of extra effort into making things butt up and seam well. Along the spine, there's no ledges that grab my finger. I can make out small gaps filled with epoxy resin or something like that. But otherwise, the transitions and everything are really quite good and feel good in my hand as well. The antler grips, or scales, I should say, the antler grip is another $100 upgrade from Landsknect Emporium on their site. I think it's a newer offering that they have. I don't remember seeing it before. But anyway, you can see antler scales on the options list now. It's a $100 upgrade or a $100 charge to have it. And initially, I would tell you that I would not ever choose antler grips. Something about them aesthetically doesn't necessarily look bad to me, but I don't recall liking them. I mean, I've held plenty of knives with antler handles and stuff like that, but I guess it just, I haven't given the same thought after having one now. And Sword for Neon said, I think you're going to like it. And I do. The cool thing about the antler grip is it has this kind of organic thing that I think blends really well with the Landsknect aesthetic. It's asymmetrical. It's got imperfections and stuff just in the grip, but also it glues itself in your hand. You all those little ridges and stuff, your fingers grab onto them in a way that just makes the weapon feel more secure in your hand. I feel like I have a great grip on it. It doesn't feel like it's going to slide around, and all those little textures and stuff like that, they don't hurt my hand, but they definitely secure my hand to the handle in a way that's very meaningful. I didn't expect it to functionally be as good, and aesthetically, I think it's awesome. I think it looks great, and I think because it has little imperfections and wanders a little bit here and there, it blends in well. It's different if the woodwork is like pristine and then you see other little imperfections in the sword. I think from the aesthetic of the kind of organic textures just work really well with overall the rest of the aesthetic of the sword. Now, other bits about the scales, I can see that the material has some, grooves and gaps and stuff that have been filled in with resin, but again, overall, just the way they line up into the guard, the cross guard up here, or the pommel, I think is really quite good. It's been sanded and done in such a way that I aesthetically think it looks really good. It also feels really good in the hand. It doesn't have a ton of taper. It swells ever so slightly towards the base here. It's got a little bit of taper in one dimension, but not so much that anything is ergonomically designed to glue your hand in place. This little beak at the end, as well as just the texture of the antler, are enough to make me feel like I'm in complete control and that it's going to stay in my hand exactly where I want. It doesn't hurt. It does have little ledges on the sides, but none of them have, as I've been doing bad cuts on things, none of them bumped into my hand or hurt me or caused any really discomfort or hot spots. So I was surprised because initially I thought these ledges would hurt. And they don't. They feel great. The little, I can't remember what these are called. The pegs that go through, they're hollow. Adam has worked them in a little bit organically to also have some texture that meshes with the antler and follows the kind of rise and fall of the antler. So that is also pretty cool. I thought there might be some sharp metal ledges or something on here, but I noticed no hot spots, nothing hurts. And I like the extra little addition to make them textured and ripple a little bit with the antler and kind of follow the organic form of the antler. I imagine that took a little bit of time, but it's appreciated. It's a detail that I think came out really well. If we move on to the crossguard, so this has the knuckelbow from the Gustav, and this is an aggressive, fun looking and feeling thing. I think I think the knucklebow is just cool from Landsknect. Now, it has some additional file work near where the blade meets. I almost would have liked to see a little bit of file work kind of down this knucklebow area, which maybe I'll feel ambitious and try to add myself at some point. But I do like the knucklebow. It feels like I could bop somebody with it. It has kind of an aggressive and just cool looking frill to it. The CC2 pommel and this knucklebow I also think go really well. They kind of share the same little beaks and valleys and kind of general theme. I think aesthetically it goes really well together. Anyway, I appreciate the extra little file work that's done on here. Those little details just add a ton for me. I see them on historic arms. I see that there's often a lot more detail in crossguards, or can be anyway, and so it's nice to see an example that I get to keep for myself. Anyway, I'm a fan of the knucklebow. The noggle on the end here, this little nail that sticks out, is right-handed because I'm a righty, and sword for needs also have always been on the left. So I have a right-handed noggle now, or one on the right. And if I choke up on the guard, my knuckle definitely bumps into it. My hands are too fat, but if I keep my hand down a little bit, I don't notice any irritation. And frankly, my hand isn't super comfortable here anyway. If I go a little further down on the grip, the antler keeps me in place, and it's a very comfortable bit here. I don't know that the noggle is big enough to really protect my hand from errant sword strikes. It would if it was just coming down, but if the blade swooped off, I'd probably get a clipped knuckle. The gap in the crossguard area here as well is really clean. I don't recall, I believe some of the other examples rather from Landsknect Emporium were kind of pressure fit on and they were tight. This looks like it was just formed really well. Apart from the fullard area down here, it has a really excellent fit. And on the bottom of the crossguard, where the messer, I believe the crossguard is slid up from the bottom here, and then there's some level of peening or additional attention to keeping this spot flat, but I can see that more attention was put in. I can see hammer marks. I can see that it's been worked to hold and pressure fit well so that it's secure on there, but it doesn't look as maybe haphazard as some of the other hammerings have been. Incidentally, on the pommel, I can also make out some hammer marks here and there to, just where you're supposed to on the peened area and where you would want the guard to be pressure fit so that it doesn't develop any wiggle, which incidentally I've seen on other messers as well. I've remarked on some of the less appealing aesthetic sides of Landsknect Emporium hitting these guards with hammers, but in the cold steel messer that I played with recently, the guard developed a wiggle and it has none of that pressure fitting, and the folks at Landsknect have told me that, hey, when these things absorb shock, if it gets a sword strike or just if you're hitting things, and it can develop a wiggle. And so a lot of attention and learning has been put into where they have to hit this with a hammer so that the guard stays secure as long as possible. Before I move to the blade, this one came with a scabbard. I added this little leather bit here. It wasn't on it originally, and this is the relatively straightforward, simple scabbard that Landsknect Emporium offers. It has the little loop suspension here, but I think this is the base scabbard that they offer. Sword Friend Ian had lent me a number of other scabbards, and they have some elaborate knot work that they can do with their belt systems. They have there's been all sorts of different scabbards that I've gotten to see from Landsknect Emporium, and so I would certainly recommend you take them up on some of the other cool options they have, because the leather work in terms of the cool skull I saw on the farmer knife, or the elaborate knots, I think all of those are really cool and unique and do some. I think they're nice looking. This leather scabbard is not bad though. $120 for a scabbard is not a bad thing. I'd certainly recommend you get one, but the other options that they offer seem cooler. And so this one would be, I think, great with one of their kind of elaborate knots, and then one of the cool. I don't know if I go floral. I go the skeleton guy looking thing. I think they do some cool scabbard work, is I suppose the point that I'm getting at. But either way. The sword itself. So this is a pretty much standard Gunther blade, and there's, I'll probably reiterate the same things that I said in that one. There's ripples in the surface, but they're not so bad. It came out of the box. If this is the sharpness that Landsknect Emporium ships with, I've always seen Sword Friend Ian's kind of secondhand, and he admittedly has said his are not safe queens. He brings them out and uses them, but this is a very sharp edge. Yeah, so it came with a sharp edge. It's also got this just beautiful deep fuller that runs almost the length of the blade. It's got a really nice and well done clip point at the end. It's a lovely shaped blade. I think the hilt in this particular case is where 90% of the zazz is. The blade fits well. I think it's beautiful and lovely. If I could make any change, or maybe not a change, I wouldn't change anything about the one I have. I love it the way it is. I wouldn't change a thing. But if Landsknect Emporium ever makes another custom variety of this, maybe a one-off or something that they decide to sell, I really thought that the 3 fullers that they put on the monster that kind of gradually tapered down may be a cool fit. I'd find a way to keep this deep fuller integrated because it makes the blade feel wonderful. But this sword in particular, in contrast to the previous Gustav blade, or not Gustav, Gunther blade that I had, has a slightly more robust distal taper in this bottom third and then continues down at about the same pace. The point of balance is a little different. It's odd because it's the same Gunther blade, but it's quite a bit heavier than the Gunther, but still lighter than the Gustav that I tested, despite having Antler, which I would suspect to be heavier, and a more elaborate pommel and stuff like that. It's still lighter than the Gustav that I looked at. Anyway, I think there's a possibility to, in this kind of bottom section here, maybe have one longer fuller, maintaining this at least a good element of this deep channel, and then have the three fullers. I think the look of that and Landsknecht's execution of it would make for a blade that had kind of the same visually stunning character as the hilt. Anyway, I do really like the blade that I have here, so I wouldn't change this one, but just to make something zazzy in the future, maybe a one-off, maybe a just something I guess I'd like to see in combination, along with the Scabbard that had some cool skulls on it. I think that would be a real highlight of all the cool things that I've seen from Landsknect. This, though, is a combination of the blade length that I liked in the Gunther and the Gustav's kind of nubby handle, along with some Antler additions and some Filework. I think overall it's awesome. I really love it. It's fantastic in the hand. I learned some things. I haven't had something with Antler before. I really like that, and it's wonderful. It's the best I could really hope for in having those two things combined, and it feels wonderful in my hand. I'm really humbled that I get to keep this. I'm surprised. Anyway, joy to hold. I did move it around. I did cut with it a little bit. I did push it a little bit as well. So I took it to a tatami mat. And again, bear in mind, I have an elbow injury and I'm swinging with my not so great arm. It'd be better than trying it with the left, I assure you. But cut really deeply into a tatami mat. It was very easy to move around. Other people actually got to cut with the blade as well. And because it's very sharp and very easy to move, it was easy to do all of the things with. It's also pretty durable. I cut into some water bottles, and I know that's not some sort of testament for amazingness, but if you cut in the neck of a water bottle where the cap is, which I did a couple times, it's a recipe to certainly diminish a blade. I've had that chip blades, I've had roll edges, and there's nothing that happened to this blade. I also did some bad strikes on quasi dried out sticks that are maybe an inch and a half, 2 inches at max. And I did some bad strikes, just kind of baseball batting this into the sticks. It cut the sticks usually pretty deep, or broke them in half. Made a lovely ring sound when I hit things, and it stayed straight despite some bad strikes. I didn't push it too much though, not because I don't trust the sword, but because my arm isn't really in a condition to do it at the moment. But all in all, the blade stayed straight. It moved around. I felt completely in control. It didn't vibrate or hurt my hand at all, even in bad strikes. It was really sharp. It moved around really easily. It does give me an indication that I did some very steep cuts, so cutting with it is something I'm going to have to get used to if I want to do it effectively or accurately, but the blade can do it. I just have to catch up to it. I hope any suggestion that I had didn't give anyone any indication that I don't absolutely love this sword. This is a fantastic thing. I think it should be offered in Landsknecht's kind of normal offerings. They should have we'll call it generosity, and build a line of generosity named blades. Hopefully my musings and ramblings on the cutting and how it moves are helpful. I will provide dimensions in the description down below. Incidentally, if you want to contrast the Gustav or Gunther that I reviewed in the respective videos, which are also linked down below, you will find measurements there where you can compare and contrast. I do find it interesting that the Gustav, being the shortest one with similar proportions, is still the heaviest, but anyway, it's just a nuanced point. The overall, though, I do really enjoy how it moves around, if that's not apparent. There's little things that the measurements can't necessarily convey, which is like how the antler feels in your hand, and how the blade index is, and how sharp it is, and how it feels in motion, and all of those things really are quite wonderful. It could be my bias blinders here from being so in love with the gift of it, but I digress. It's an amazing feeling sword. I do want to compare now some of the differences between the Darksword Armory Sword Messer that I have, the Albion Soldat that I have, and then this Landsknect Emporium piece, because the Darksword Armory Sword, the Messer that I have, is roughly $540 if you subtract the Scabbard option or choose the option sharpened without a Scabbard. If I subtract the cost of the Scabbard from the Landsknect Emporium piece, it's about $930, and then the Albion Soldat is $1,200-ish or $1,220 something dollars. The thing is that each one of them is kind of a sequential jump in price, and I thought it'd be interesting to contrast. Hey, what do you get for that? Do bear in mind that the Albion doesn't really have any lower option. It is exactly what it is. As is the Darksword Armory piece, you can choose sharpened or with or without a scabbard or belt system. But the Landsknect Emporium piece offers a little bit more option to bring the cost down or shoot the cost up if you want. So anyway, with that in mind, I'm first going to take a look at the Darksword Armory piece and contrast a little bit what you get in terms of differences. So just holding the two up briefly, you can see that there's some visual differences. In blade, the Landsknect Emporium is a little longer, a little thinner. They're just different profiles of messer. So I'm going to set this down and just comment on some of the main differences in build quality, which are probably most relevant. All right, so first thing to notice is that the fittings are just generally a little bit bigger, and it adds a little bit more weight. The pommel's a little meatier. The quillins and this block where the crossguard meets is a little bit more bulbous. This nagel right here is certainly differently shaped and covers my knuckles a little bit more. I don't know how historically accurate that is or isn't, but I don't see that the pin runs through the guard. I'm not entirely sure. It looks to me like this was either cast on with this piece or was welded on separately, but isn't a pin that runs through the sword. And this looks a little bit more like a typical sword construction in that I don't see the shoulders of the blade down at the bottom here. So construction-wise, a little different, and the fittings are just a little bit more bulbous. I do see some spots where resin is filling, but I think Darksword Armory actually did a better job in filling it, and the scales are fit on a little bit more evenly. I don't see spots where they're filled or run around, or I guess there's less spots filled with resin and the like. But I do see imperfections on here. It's not perfect, but I do think the finish work is maybe a little bit better. The materials are different. This is wood, but it's also a less expensive sword. The handle shape is different, but that's stylistically, part of how this is, and that they're just different style masters. Landsknect Emporium may make something with a curved handle. I'm not sure, but I can't really comment on the shape difference. This does just have a peened on pommel versus, like a knife handle end. So it's a little bit more sword-like as opposed to some of the unique things that make a messer hilt messery. The other bit is that the handle or the blade here is more uniform in geometry. It doesn't have as much taper. It doesn't start as thick as the Landsknect Emporium, but it maintains a thickness. It's a bit wider, and the sharpness level out of the box anyway, the Landsknect is quite a bit sharper. This feels stout, and that's not necessarily bad for a messer, but this is this is an imposing beefcake of a blade. Build quality wise, it's shinier, but the Landsknect Emporium piece seems to touch on a lot of physical things that make a messer more uniquely a messer in terms of the hilt construction. And the blade offers more distal taper and more, I guess, more nuance that's unique to the geometry of a sword. This, from being a big knife, being a messer is much more like that. It doesn't have as detailed a fullering. It stays pretty consistent in terms of the taper, and the handle is more sword-like. Interesting contrast, though. The Albion, and this is maybe a contrast that more people are interested in. The Albion Soldat versus the Landsknect Emporium Messer. Again, side by side, you can see they're just different styles. Landsknect Emporium might make something that's a little bit more akin to this, but I'm going to set it down and go over some of the build quality differences. So the Albion Soldat, I've made a review on. I'll link it in the description down below, and if you want more elaboration on what I think about it, then you'll find it there. The basic gist is there's less attempted here. There's not really any elaborate fullering. There's also a clipped point and a false edge. The handle has some subtle details that make it kind of special, little grooves and file markings, and it also has a pommel on here that doesn't hurt if you hold it lower on the grip. But overall, they're just stylistically different messers, so it's not necessarily fair to compare that aspect of it. What I would say is the major difference is that the Albion visually is closer to perfection. It's not hitting it though. There's more imperfections on the woodwork here than I'm accustomed to seeing in Albion, and that was one of the points I made in the review, is that the woodworking just, I can make out little gaps and things like that in this Albion where I haven't historically been able to do that in most of the Albions that I've reviewed. And the Soldat is one of the less perfect variety that I've seen from Albion, at least if I base all that on one example, which admittedly has been used a bit. So it still, though, is visually just more symmetrical. It has less ripples, less imperfections, fewer signs of hammer marks and things like that. And if that visually is what you like, then this is going to be the more appealing variety. It is a fine feeling sword and wonderful in the hand, but it's also not attempting as much. The Landsknect Emporium variety for this has a lot more zazz and detail artistically. I think if you get past the imperfections of it, it's just attempting more, and there's more cool stuff. Both swords dynamically feel good. Both swords incorporate distal taper and strong understandings of how swords are supposed to feel. The Landsknect Emporium does it with some fullering and some zazz and some things that I think are maybe a little bit more fitting of a Landsknect. If both of them were people, this would be the best way to describe it, is I'd want to have a beer with the Landsknect Emporium piece. Not that I wouldn't hang out with either one. Not that either one aren't great swords, but I think I'd tip a few more back with the piece from Landsknect Emporium. I think it's taking on more, and for the money, if I was visually looking for something closer to perfection, this is certainly still the choice. But the Landsknect Emporium piece, if you can get past that, or if this shows enough of a visual improvement, then I think there's just more to be had with the Landsknect Emporium piece. The Antler pieces, the additional metal work, in terms of the zazz that it added, the fullering and things like that, all I think make for a more compelling piece. If I add the component of a scabbard, though, that's where it really starts standing apart. To get the Todd Stuff scabbard, which was here, is certainly an additional cost. I outlined that in the video that I made. The Landsknect Emporium piece with the scabbard is, the affordability becomes even more apparent when you tackle the scabbard component. All right, sword friends, hopefully my camera work or my babbles have helped you decide where your money is better spent, and if this sword is worth it, or one like it is worth it, or something else similar to it is worth it. That is all I have for you. I do want to offer, though, one final special thanks to sword friend Adam at Landsknect Emporium for the additional file work and the attention to detail on the sword. It's zazzy and it's awesome, and thank you for your hard work. And sword friend Ian, thank you so much for commissioning the sword for me. I'm taken back that anything I do warrants this kind of generosity. Thank you. I will treasure this sword. You fellow sword friends out there will also see it. Again, if you have questions about it or any of the other swords that I've put in here, throw them in the commentary down below. But I really like this one. This is a fun one to mess around with, and unique and special, and it's got such a cool story about being combined between two swords that I happen to like in various reviews. And so it's not just that it's a fancy sword, but that it combines feedback from things that I loved. It makes it a very special thing. So thank you again, thank you some more, and that's all I've got. Cheers, thanks for watching.